It starts with
One thing, I don't know why, it doesn't even matter how hard you try.
Battle Royale. The premise is beautiful, if you like that type of thing. And let's face it, unless you're just a little bit curious to check it out, you're only here because you have a bit of a taste for blood yourself. 42 students are abducted, tagged, and placed on an island with no prospects for escape. They are given basic survival tools, a random weapon or tool to use to their advantage, a map of the island, and 3 days to kill everyone else, or they all die. And to really emphasize the point so that the reader can follow, the novel itself contains the map of the island with coordinates and a list of all the students' names. This helps immensely with the obvious few problems that this concept presents. Number 1, you can follow the action and consider where you, the reader, would go as the zones are shutting off. 2, I'm not Japanese. 42 characters, many with names that seem similar to me, is a lot to take in. This list allowed me to make a few notes so that I could distinguish the characters from each other. Then a few cold hard realities set in, with some early, rather graphic murders occurring before the game even starts. You realise that this book really is what was advertised. A massacre to the end. And it's not fair. Why were they chosen? What their weapons are? It's all random. Some get very lucky. Many are doomed from the start. The action then begins, and the reader is pulled in almost right away as several storylines begin to unfold. Our main protagonist, Shuya Nanahara, manages to find his soon-to-be ladylove, Noriko Nakagawa, and they make an unlikely alliance with the rather mysterious transfer student, Shogo Kawada, who, whilst initially painted as a villain, turns out to be a previous winner who claims that he can get them all off the island. Meanwhile, in another little corner, one of Shuya's friends, Shinji Mamara, aka the Third Man, an extremely intelligent and resourceful political malcontent, teams up with his friend Yutaka and begins planning to end the game by blowing up the control center where the island staff have bunkered themselves in. Kazuo Kiriyama, the leader of one of the more notorious street gangs, emerges as one of the early antagonists of the novel, luring members of his gang to the beach, then one by one killing them in cold blood and taking their weapons, thereby amassing the most powerful arsenal. One lone henchman of this group, Sho Tsukioka, catches wind of this plan and decides to hang back and follow Kazuo at a distance, wait for him to kill the majority, before then attacking him. Meanwhile, another lone wolf, this time one of Shuya's friends in Hiroki Sugimura, spends his time searching the island with some type of radar gadget for a girl named Kayoko, as well as his friend Takako. Mitsuko Suma emerges as the story's major female antagonist. Ruthless, promiscuous, damaged, and kind of psychopathic, she sheds quite a bit of blood early. Then we have her main lieutenant in Hirono Shimizu going rogue and doing her own thing. A couple of early plot developments from relatively minor characters, e.g. students collecting the backpacks of their fallen comrades, Yuko seeing a classmate die while fighting with Shuya, and 2 students getting gunned down whilst getting the megaphone out and trying to organise a ceasefire, and you get the feeling that this is going to be a hell of a story. Then it stops. The unknown characters start getting picked off one by one. Many of them, in fact, die the first time we check in with them. The story stops bouncing around from perspective to perspective, and character development completely stalls as our focus stays primarily on Team Shuya, Team Shinji, Kiriyama, and Mitsuko. Both Sho and Hirono die pretty quickly, the former in particularly disappointing fashion after Kazuo leads him into a forbidden zone. This outcome really bugged me because at no point does the novel really specify how/when Kiriyama found out he was being followed. And that kind of brings me to the big bugbear of this novel. For some bizarre reason, after a really solid start in which it is revealed that Kiriyama is not able to feel empathy, or anything at all for that matter, secondary to his mother being involved in a car accident whilst he was in utero, kind of changing his genetic makeup, I guess, and his decision to take part in the program being based on being something to do, the author decides to stop developing the character. And from that point forth until almost the very end, with only one exception, we seldom get Kiriyama's perspective again. Instead, he becomes something of a Jason Voorhees type killer. He just pops up from time to time, kills masterfully, and slinks back into the darkness. This is a real shame, because this guy by far kills the most number of students, about 14 or so, and yet we get very little from him. No calculating, no strategy, feedback, zilch. Just random killings. And when you boil that down further, outside of the first few chapters, no recurring characters at all are killed in this story, right up until page 375-ish of a 600-page novel. That's when Shinji's luck runs out after he and his friends cross paths with Kiriyama whilst enacting their plans. Page 375. That's over half the story before something significant happens, and to add insult to injury, we still haven't even met half of the surviving characters, many of which we later find out are stowed away in the lighthouse. You really have to wonder if we needed 42 competitors in this story, or if we would have been better off getting, say, 25 and really developing them. Mitsuko, as it turns out, is in fact the best antagonist in this story. Whilst presenting a front of being ruthlessly psychotic, cunning, and using her promiscuity to manipulate her peers, over the course of the story, as one learns of her horrific upbringing, you actually begin to develop a real sense of sympathy for this girl who is known as the fallen angel. And ultimately, her death and her dying moments are actually really quite sad. Ultimately, the novel ends in a way that you would expect. The intrigue isn't so much in whether Shuya and Noriko make it out alive, but rather what Shogo's plan is, and how it happens. And whilst the ending isn't knocked out of the park, it's fitting enough. Unlike any truly great seller, this novel has resulted in a surge of derivative works, novels, films, movies alike, most of which aren't worthy of a mention, with few exceptions. One coming from recent times, with the immensely popular Hunger Games franchise taking off and drawing controversy for what many perceive as a near identical basic plot, with its own political implications and totalitarian premise really catching the ire of many. But we'll talk about that later. The Marvel Universe has gotten into the act with its own title, Avengers Arena, actively acknowledging both Battle Royale as well as the Hunger Games as its chief inspiration behind the title. Quentin Tarantino himself reportedly based Kill Bill's violently sadistic Go-Go Yubari, as portrayed by Chiaki Kuriyama, on that actress's previous adaptation of Takako Shiksuwa from 2000's Battle Royale. I never really got this though. This character clearly seems based on Mitsuko, if you ask me. Certainly, Battle Royale's influence on modern culture cannot be denied, and whether you like this type of thing or not, this is a story that simply must be experienced once in a lifetime. It not only forces us to explore our own humanity, but challenges the reader's primal instinct. What would you do to survive? And of these characters, whose fate is yours? Next time from The Winter Soldier, diverting briefly from our path of bloodlust, we turn our attention to another entertainment medium, which for nearly 15 years has explored the concept of individuals working together, whilst all the while knowing that ultimately only one of them can make it to the end. That's right, you guessed it, our very own modern PG-13 version of Battle Royale, Survivor. From working together and building a society, gaining trust, developing allies, deception, immunity idols, and ultimately facing those whose bodies they stand on. What does Survivor tell us about human nature? I guess we'll find out. This is Winter Soldier here, signing off. Hope to catch you next time.